Um, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Mutoro. It's a pleasure for us to start our webinar this afternoon. And I think it's important that even before we start, we appreciate the reason why we are not physical. We do appreciate the challenge to do with COVID. I mean, it's a global problem. Kenya has not been particularly left behind, although the fact that the pandemic slowly sliding, I mean, is good news. Having said so, today we would like to discuss about illicit trade. Is one major challenge as a country, which costs us an estimated 153 billion shillings. As we discussed today, our budget will just been able to release, I think, about 3.6 or so trillion. When you have a significant amount like 153 billion being lost to illicit trade, then I think it warrants some discussion and conversation. So today, the Consumer Federation of Kenya is privileged to partner with the Tax Justice of South Africa, and in a campaign we call Stop Crime Campaign, and it's basically about issues to do with organized crime. So people are questioning about illicit trade, the goods and services. You know, we talk about consumers. I think the question we need to be asking ourselves going forward is what future for illicit trade? What if illicit trade consumes more than 50% of our budget? And I think those are some of the questions that we'll be asking ourselves as we go on. We'll also be releasing national survey results that was conducted between June 7th and 14th, in which there are quite very interesting results. But more important will be the way forward. So to take us through this kind of discussion, of course, we have special panelists. We have my colleagues, Yusuf, Abramjee from Tax Justice South Africa. He also happens to be the vice chair of the Crime Stoppers International. We also have Makali Lepholisa, former head of customs in Lesotho, but she also doubles up as a director of Tax Justice South Africa. Locally, we'll be having Ahmed, Amin, the chief manager, quality inspection from the Kenya Bureau of Standards. We also have, in fact, on the ready, Dr. John Akoten, who is the deputy director at the Counterfeits Authority. Granted, Counterfeits Authority does not necessarily deal with illicit trade, but among the illicit trade, over 70% is actually estimated to be counterfeit. We'll also be having Dr. Evans Oruta from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. And I'm sure you will be having other panelists, joining us with time. But having said so, I think it's my turn just to talk briefly about why illicit trade. Illicit trade is costing this country quite a lot of money, but then there is no leadership in terms of stemming these vice. So it behoves of us as a country, as a nation, to try and ask ourselves where we went wrong and how we can address this issue. The speakers, of course, will be giving the experience from government side, civil society side, development partner side, and even private sector. So it will be important to know what future portends in terms of dealing with illicit trade in this country. Stop Crime Kenya campaign is actually a citizen movement, and we also want to take this opportunity to say, look, to the media, to all partners, that we need to see a way of support. So that's a collective problem. In fact, when you talk about illicit trade, it has become so important that you can't leave it to government alone. Days when people used to say this is a government problem are long gone. And I think it's important that, ladies and gentlemen, we start taking the ownership of this problem. So without necessarily following the program of our order, in terms of the discussions, I would like to, of course, if he's ready, to introduce Dr. Evans Oruta from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, the university. And he'll be just talking about case study of smuggled goods. This would be cigarettes. You'll also be talking about issues to do with other commonly counterfeited or probably illicit traded products like alcohol and beverages, particularly spirits. He'll also, I'm sure, tell us within the shortest time possible years, talk about electronics, because electronics is a major problem. So if Dr. Oruta is ready, I think that will be very good. And just in terms of the house rules, I can see we have quite a number of us already following the discussion. Guess over 200 people so far. I think it's important also to say, if you have a comment, a question, there is a chat that my colleague, technical colleagues here would be able to share. You can send a chat, maybe as a private one or to everyone. Please, it's important to do mention that. But I think it's just important that I will be making my remarks in between what colleagues will be doing. So over to Dr. Oruta, if he's able to hear me, I can see him.
Thanks, Chair. I can hear you. My name is Dr. Evans Oruta. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Criminology and Social Work, School of Arts and Social Sciences, Masinde Muliro University. I have been at the university teaching for the last 6 years. And before joining the university, I was a law enforcement officer where I was working at the National Police Service for around 20 years, rising through the ranks of inspector by the time I left the police service in 2015 to join the academia. I will quickly go through the task that I have been given today so that I can do a case study of what I narrowed down to look at illicit trade, specifically matters to do with the cigarettes, illicit brew, that is alcohol, and then illicit beverages, alcohol, and also matters to do with the electronics. To come up to my presentation, I had to do extensive literature review, which is reflected in my presentation. So I'll directly go to my presentation because of the time that has been allocated to me, around 15 minutes to do the presentation. So I will share my screen and then go through the presentation. And afterwards, if there is a question, I will gladly respond to it. So I've already introduced myself. I'll go direct to introduction, where we are saying that according to World Health Organization, illicit trade is any practice or conduct prohibited by law and which relates to production, shipment, receipt, possession, distribution, sale, or purchase, including any practice or conduct intended to facilitate such an activity. I'll proceed by saying that illicit trade is any form, also that's another definition. Illicit trade is any form of trade that infringes the rules, laws, regulations, licenses, taxation systems, embargoes, and all procedures that countries use to organize trade, protect citizens, raise standards of living, and enforce codes of ethics. This is according to World Customs Organization 2012. There is other definitions there that I will not dwell much into, but I would like to point out that illicit trade is one of the activities or illegal activities that is conducted by individuals because they want to earn illicit or illegitimate money in an environment whereby opportunity for economic benefit is perceived to outweigh the actual risks involved. And in this particular case, you look at rational choice theory, it explains very well that a rational thinker, you know, before committing a crime, he will have to weigh between, say, the possible benefits that come from the criminal venture vis-a-vis the risks that are involved. And in most cases with illicit trade, you realize that the risks are lower and the benefits are high, which makes it possible for the perpetrators of this particular activity to go ahead and commit these particular crimes. Looking at the extent of the cost of illicit trade, according to the Business Action to Stop Counterfeit and Privacy, the total value of counterfeit and pirated goods stood at US dollars 923 billion. That is 1.13 trillion in 2013. And there is a forecast that it may rise up to around 2.81 trillion by the year 2022. So you can look at the damage the illicit trade does. Closer to East Africa, you realize that according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it estimates that in the East Africa community governments lose over US dollars 500 million in tax revenue annually due to the influx of counterfeit and pirated products. It is notable that this figure does not encompass several other forms of illicit trade. In Kenya, being the largest market in East Africa, it serves as the major distribution point to the surrounding countries, that is Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia. That is according to the International Chamber of Commerce 2012. Conversely, it is also the biggest market for counterfeit goods, which is something to worry about, and contraband in East Africa, sourced mainly from India, China, rivaling key foreign exchange earners, that is tourism, tea, and also coffee in terms of earnings. We proceed by saying that according to a study conducted by, that is a survey that was conducted by Anti-Counterfeit Authority between October 2019 and February 2020, it shows that illicit trade cost Kenya 103 billion in revenue, that is in 2018, and this was up to 101.23 billion in 2017. The survey further found that building, mining, and construction sector was hit the hardest by counterfeits in the past year by attracting 23.3% in the value of total illicit trade. It was also followed by energy and then electrical and electronic sectors, which accounted for 14.67%. Further, between 2016 and 2018, there were 7,484 jobs that were lost due to illicit trade, with counterfeiting accounting for 32.59% of the jobs that were lost. when we look at the enabling conditions according to the National Action Plan for Implementation Framework to Combat Illicit Trade 2019-2022, it outlines various, factors that have been identified as the ones that make it possible for illicit trade to thrive. Notably, we have weaknesses in national regulatory regimes. We also have uncoordinated enforcement mechanisms. We have a lot of enforcement agencies, and when there is lack of proper coordination, you realize that illicit trade thrives. We also have limited resources, which lead to inefficiency in combating illicit trade. There is also an issue of technological advancement, that is the slow rate of adoption of especially new or emerging technology to combat this particular trade. There is also lack of, or say, inadequate consumer awareness. Remember, this is one of the crimes that has been classified by the law enforcement agencies as a victimless crime. And, the consumers play a very critical role in making it easier for these particular crimes to thrive. So lack of adequate awareness to the consumers makes it necessary for these particular crimes to thrive. Also, there is inadequate screening of goods passing through custom borders, and also unmanned border points. That is, we have some illegal border crossing, especially in the various borders of Kenya. We proceed by also looking at the issue of corruption, which is an issue that weakens the enforcement of laws, making it necessary for these particular crimes to thrive. You also have weak enforcement, also inadequate sanctions, whereby the sanctions that the offenders or the perpetrators of these crimes face when found guilty before a court of law, they are not deterrent enough. In other words, they don't, like sound a warning to even would-be offenders or even those ones who have offended, so that they can be prevented from committing such crimes in the future, because they can easily, for instance, pay their fines and then continue with their, criminal activities. There is also the issue of public tolerance and consumer behavior. In many markets, consumers are aware that they are purchasing smuggled goods or even counterfeit goods, but nevertheless, they are happy with what they are doing. And in such a case, for example, if they withdraw from creating the demand, then probably there won't be supply. Next, we also have, illicit trade in some areas, such as counterfeiting can be more profitable than other risky ventures, like, for example, trade in narcotics. There is also another issue of globalization and other factors there that I don't want to go much into. We go to the commonly smuggled products. According to the survey that was conducted by the Anti-Counterfeit Agency 20.
Sorry, Dr. for slight interruption.
Yes.
Yeah, because of the time, kindly just give us those highlights as we proceed. But I really appreciate the kind of detail that you have, which of course we'll be sharing also with participants at the end of the meeting. Thank you, and carry on.
Then let me go directly to it's okay. Let me go directly to the three areas. We realize that the most commonly smuggled products include foodstuffs, juices, and according to the Counterfeit Agency, you look at the statistics that have been provided there. Electricals are among the top 5 of the most commonly smuggled items, and the cost of smuggled cigarettes, the cost of smuggled illicit alcohol is at 30 billion, costing the Kenyan economy 30 billion in tax evasions, and also matters to do with cigarettes 70 billion, which is quite a big amount of money to lose. Effects of illicit trade is more or less with the extent that I had highlighted above. And I will go to what we need to do so that, which is my second last slide, what we need to do so that we can prevent this illicit trade. Number one, we can do interagency coordination, augmented by private sector engagement. Number two, we have pursuance of a carefully articulated open public campaign, among others. In conclusion, we are saying that despite the numerous legislative and regulatory efforts to streamline the trade, the plague of illicit trade has continued to thrive in the country. So probably what we need to do is to have a multi-agency approach in curbing this particular crime. And also there is limited literature in terms of what is available. So probably we can have more research being funded and being conducted so that we can have more research being done. We have recommendations from those research so that we can have literature and we can have data that we can scientifically use and say this is the extent of a particular illicit trade in Kenya, and probably these are the recommendations so that together with what is existing, it can supplement the already existing multi-agent strategies and ensure that probably we make some improvement in fighting this particular vice. Thank you very much, and that is my end. That is the end of my presentation.
Very well done, Dr. Oruta. I can see quite a detailed work, and thanks for the excellent input of the Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. As we proceed, before we call in the next speaker, we're also having a poll that's going on. And the question on the poll is that to what extent does illicit trade worry you as a person? It could be extreme, it could be whatever. So it will be running for about 10 minutes or so. Kindly do your poll so that you can be able to know whether you're worried or not worried, because sometimes it's not enough for us to probably hit the alarm bells when it doesn't worry you. So kindly give us a feedback on that. Very good presentation once again. Thank you, Dr. Oruta from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. Anybody with a question to him can be able to use the chat or probably can send to everybody else for a comment. We would now want to proceed to the next speaker from the Anti-Counterfeits Authority. Dr. John Akoten is the Deputy Director and one of the long-serving officers of that institution. Dr. Akoten, the floor is yours for the next 15 minutes or so. Thank you. Dr. Akoten, you can unmute yourself if I can see you. And if you could move the computer screen closer to you so we can see you properly. Thank you. So kindly unmute yourself and proceed. Your mic is yeah, it's on now. Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen Mutoro, for inviting me to this particular forum. I'm John Akoten. I work with the Anti-Counterfeit Authority as the Deputy Director for Research, Awareness, and Quality Assurance. I'll be taking you briefly through this particular presentation. First of all, just to introduce who ACA is, and then the different forms of illicit trade, the economic size of illicit trade, which Dr. Oruta was able to list, and the various strategies that govern illicit trade. How do we then, as ACA, combat counterfeiting?
Sorry, Dr. Akoten, there's some people in your background, I think they're a bit audible. If they can be requested to remain silent so we can hear you well. There's some people, I think, speaking behind you.
My mic.
Okay, or the mic would have. No, what you could do, and with a light touch, I don't think you have COVID for the time being. If you can just move your mask for the duration of the discussion. Sorry for that. Thank you.
I don't know whether you can hear me now.
Yeah, yeah. Although the volume is yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Okay.
But you can up your volume a bit.
All right. I'm actually in a public place. I've been in a hotel.
No wonder. No wonder. No wonder. Sorry about that.
I'm in a public place. Yeah.
Okay,
So
we'll bear with that. We'll bear with that. And thanks for the sacrifice.
Yeah, I'll introduce ACA, then talk about briefly about the forms of illicit trade, the economic size of illicit trade, and the various statutes that govern illicit trade. And then how ACA combats counterfeiting. Then I'll go through just briefly just the challenges and the conclusion. Basically, some of the challenges have already been alluded to by Dr. Evans Oruta. Now, ACA is a state corporation in the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development in the State Department for Trade. It was established by the Counterfeit Act number 13 of 2008. And we have quite a number of functions. One is on the public awareness, enforcement, where we have enforcement officers as well as also designated inspectors, which I'll talk about. Then building the capacities of the various stakeholders to deal with issues of counterfeiting. Then the coordination, given the fact that counterfeiting cuts across different sectors, ministries and departments. Then of course, we provide policy advice to government on various strategies, policy issues, what needs to be done. And of course, we do conduct research. Now, illicit trade, just as Evans mentioned, is that it's a trade that infringes the rules. Whether you're talking about the laws, you're talking about the regulations, the policies, systems, procedures, anything, any trade where when you talk about, the buying and selling of various goods and that particular trade does not conform to lay down regulations or policies, then that kind of trade is regarded as illicit trade. Then we have different forms of illicit trade. For example, counterfeiting is one form of illicit trade. And this one we talk about, infringement of intellectual property rights. Then we have the pirated goods that include issues about movies, books, and so on. So if those books and movies are reproduced without the authority of the owner, then they're regarded as pirated goods. And then substandard goods are those ones that do not meet, the minimum standards. So my colleague also from KEBS will be able to talk about that. So the uncustomed goods are those ones that do not pass through the custom territory, and therefore they have been infringed on a particular law. When you talk about undervalued goods, these are goods that may have gone actually through the customs territory, but then the true value of the goods have not been indicated, so that somebody avoids paying taxes. And then the concealed goods, these are goods that are concealed, let's say in containers. Somebody do not want the government agencies to see these goods, so they are concealed, like smuggled goods. And then finally we have the dumped goods, which the goods which have been dumped into a country and the price actually are lower than the prices from the importing countries. And then finally, we have the subsidized goods. Again, these are goods whose prices, again, are lower. So we have quite a number of different forms of illicit trade. Others you can talk about, sale of human body parts, trafficking of human and animal trophies, and so on. If you look at the dumped goods and subsidized goods, we have a new organization. Sorry, there's a lot of noise here in my background here. There's a body which is called the Kenya Trade Remedies Authority Agency, and that's the one that deals with issues of dumped or subsidized goods.
We can still hear you. We understand, Dr. Akoten, we understand. Just carry on.
There's a lot of, we have so many people around.
I think that's the beauty of Naivasha. Please carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the next slide just shows some pictures of the different types of illicit goods. For example, we have fake medicine. We have fake, products. For example, like the Roundup for the herbicides, or talk about food, or even animal feeds like Makali. We can also have alcohol, for example, or even counterfeit spare parts. Now, in the next slide, I wanted just to the participants just to look at the two different kind of products and tell which one could actually be counterfeit. Now we have 1A and we have 1B, and then we have 2A and 2B. If you look at these particular products, sometimes you may not actually tell which is counterfeit. But you know, from if you look at 1A, of course, we have the name, which is Nike. The other one is also Nike, but then the letters have actually been interchanged. But you find that the product on the left side, which is 1A, appears to be more appealing than the one in on the right-hand side. Now, the one below, if you look at the two again, they are quite similar. So it's very, very difficult. Easy. I mean, it's not really easy for you really to identify which is a counterfeit and which is an original. But of course, the one on the right is the one which is a counterfeit. So they look quite similar. So identifying counterfeit is not that easy. It's very, very, very difficult. So it just shows how it is difficult really to identify counterfeit goods unless you have been trained by the IPR owners. Now, this slide is about the economic size of illicit trade, which Dr. Oruta did mention. We talk about illicit trade globally as well as also regional, where as ACA we were able to conduct a baseline survey that revealed that the country lost 726 billion worth of illicit trade in 2017, which increased to 826 billion. And then when we talk about counterfeits, for example, the BASCAP report gives a figure of 923 billion to 1.13 trillion US dollars in the year 2013, which is estimated to increase to around 1.9 to 2.81 trillion dollars. In the EAC, of course, the EAC loses around 500 million US dollars in the year 2008. And Kenya, we have the Kenya Publishers Association that estimated that through book piracy, they were able to lose around 2 billion shillings per year. And in our neighboring country, the tax evasion cost them around 540 billion to 900 billion Tanzanian shillings. Now, what are the various statutes that govern illicit trade in Kenya? We have the Animal Diseases Act, which is enforced by the Director of Veterinary Medicine. We have the Anti-Counterfeit Act of 2008 by ACA, the Competition Act by the Competition Authority of Kenya, Consumer Protection Act by KECOPAC, the Copyright Act by the Kenya Copyright Board, East African Community Customs Management Act, the Exercise Duty, and so on. Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Services, the National Police Service, the Pest Control Products that which is governed by the Pest Control Products Board that govern issues about the pesticides and so on. The Pharmacy and Poisons Board that governs issues about human medicine as well as poisons. The Plant Health the Plant Protection Act governed by the Director of Agriculture, the Public Health Act, the Seed and Plant Varieties Act, the Standard Act, Tobacco Act, the Trade Descriptions Act, Weights and Measures Act, and finally the Kenya Trade Remedies Act. So we have quite a number of of statutes that govern illicit trade. Now, as a country, given the fact that illicit trade cuts across different ministries and departments, so the issue of coordination became a major challenge. So sometime back in July 2018, a Gazette notice was published that established the Anti-Illicit Trade Executive Forum, which consists of CEOs both in the public as well as the private sector. And this forum has two working groups. One is the enforcement working group that consists of the private sector and the law enforcement agencies, for example, like ACA, KEBS, KRA, and so on. And then there's also the public outreach working group. Essentially, these two working groups work hand in hand. The enforcement deals with issues of the supply of illicit trade, while the public awareness outreach is called the multi-agency anti-illicit trade outreach, MAITO, deals with the demand for counterfeit and illicit goods. Essentially, the executive forum does not have a policy connection. So within the National Action Plan to combat illicit trade, we came up with a proposal that we need a policy organ, which is called the National Anti-Illicit Trade Coordination Center, to be composed of the principal secretaries involved in combating illicit trade, and the appointee should be a presidential appointee to report to the cabinet. So this is yet to be established, but already we have done a cabinet memo, and it's going to be discussed.
Dr. I think yes. A very, very good presentation. I really don't want to interfere with it, but I'm just looking at your slide 11 of 32. Like yes, 11 of 32, and I'm just wondering whether you cannot highlight, give highlights, and then we can look at the details later. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about. Actually, I was going to skip others. Actually, this is a long presentation, but I was just actually coming to an end.
Okay,
Again,
thank you.
In combating counterfeiting, basically we have two ways. Basically dealing with the supply as well as the demand through enforcement and public awareness. We came up with the National Action Plan to combat illicit trade, which is a roadmap to help us to deal with issues of illicit trade. We have inspectors under the Counterfeit Act. We have the appointed inspectors as well as also the designated inspectors that include the Kenya Bureau of Standards and other institutions. And basically, these are the designated inspectors. When we talk about the customs, development, trade development officers, industrial development officers, the copyright, officers, weights and measures, and so on. These have been brought under the Counterfeit Act to deal with issues of counterfeiting. We have quite a number of powers on inspectors. Offenses have actually been outlined very well in the Counterfeit Act. The penalties are also there, where we talk about a fine of not less than 3 times the value of illicit trade. So it gives a minimum fine that a court can impose on a counterfeiter, and up to 5 years imprisonment. If you're a second or subsequent offender, then a fine of not less than 5 times. Basically, in terms of achievement, we've been able to seize over 2 billion worth of counterfeit goods and destroy almost half of that. When it comes to illicit trade, that we were able to do it under the multi-agency approach, we seized over 13.5 billion worth of counterfeit illicit goods and destroyed 1.6 billion. On awareness, we deal with issues of reducing the demand for counterfeits. That's through public outreach, capacity building, collaboration, both international as well as nationally. Our research also shows that 70% of consumers purchase counterfeit goods. Out of that, 19% purchase counterfeit goods knowingly, while 81% purchase counterfeit goods unknowingly. So there's a lot that we need to do in terms of creating public awareness. These are the baseline statistics. I think I don't need to go through this one because Oruta was able to take us through this. In terms of the public awareness on illicit trade, counterfeiting was at 66%. But overall illicit trade level of public awareness stands at 64.14%. If we look at awareness on counterfeits alone, the percentage has actually been increasing from 51% in 2015 to 66% in 2019. And our approach is to increase this one to 100%. Farm sales losses, again, you can see that over time between the year 2016 and 2018, the farm sales losses have actually been decreasing from 175 billion to 72 if you look at the totals up there. So it has reduced. And I think this is because of the effect of the multi-agency efforts in Kenya, where we've been able to reduce the farm sales losses resulting from illicit trade. This one I've already been mentioned. This is the illicit trade observatory that can guide the various stakeholders on what we are doing as a country in terms of fighting illicit trade. This is a platform where the private sector and the enforcement agencies can log in, provide the statistics, and the system will be able to compute all this and be able to see where we are in terms of combating illicit trade. Basically, the challenges have already been mentioned. In conclusion, is that illicit trade affects everyone, of course, in the country. It affects the private sector, the government, the consumers, and we need concerted efforts to deal with illicit trade by the international community, the national and county governments, business community, as well as consumers. Thank you so much.
I think that's well done, Dr. That's well done. The background, I think, gave you a little of peace as you're doing that, but a very, very good presentation, quite incisive, very good for people in academic world, private sector, government. That's excellent. In fact, when I was looking at that, I was seeing a comment from, I think, Kelvin, and it seems to have Kelvin on the chat. He was saying, we all know the problem on illicit trade is not about traders, but the law enforcement. How do we deal with the law enforcement? Because they are the biggest impediment to fight against illicit trade. That I think is a very good question for Dr. Akoten at some point in time. I just think through as we follow through. Again, the poll was able to present about 84% of us were extremely worried, and I'm happy that 100% of us who voted. Only 16% said they're fairly worried with the challenge of the extent of illicit trade in this country. So again, now we would like to proceed again very quickly. This kind of meetings are better when they're short so that we have more time for engagement. I would like to get the next speaker. And I think our next speaker would be one of our insiders. Call him insiders because Yusuf Abramjee is actually part of the brains that were able to form the Stop Crime Kenya campaign. Like I said, Yusuf is a director with the Tax Justice South Africa. Yusuf is also the vice chair of the Crime Stoppers International, and he has a huge following on Twitter. If you want to know what goes on in the other world, I don't know what to call it, a criminal world or whatever in South Africa, you would actually be able to follow. I've just seen that one of the tweets was somebody, I think prominently, South African may have just died or something. That was the last tweet I saw from him. So may I welcome Yusuf. He told me he has a bit of challenges with his presentation, but basically Yusuf is going to give us the result of a survey that we did between June 7th and 14th. And then of course, he is going to give us any other additional information. Yusuf, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Program Director. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends from Kenya and other parts of the world. From a rather cold Pretoria, the capital city, right at the most southern tip of Africa, South Africa, and I'm sure many of you have been to South Africa. If not, I'm inviting you to visit our beautiful country as much as I want to visit Kenya as well. Let me first of all, Program Director, in the limited time that we have available, congratulate you and the Consumers Federation of Kenya, the new organization called StoCK, which is really in the forefront of fighting lawlessness and fighting crime. I know that my colleague, a fellow director on Tax Justice South Africa, Makali, is joining us in a bit as well. And she has much more experience, specifically around the illicit trade, seeing that she was the head of customs and excise in neighboring Lesotho for many, many years, and she's got vast experience in this field. You correctly mentioned, Program Director, I have a presentation, but I tried loading it earlier, but if it doesn't show on your side, my sincere apologies. I'll ask you to share it with our participants immediately after the presentation. Let me start off by saying that before I share the results of this important and very disturbing survey, I would like to talk briefly about the necessity of tackling the illicit trade and why I am here today. The illicit trade is a growing menace in societies across the world. We in South Africa have this problem, you have the problem, across many parts of the world, we have this problem. And the third part, Program Director, is that it is growing. It affects virtually every sector of society, right from the retail trade to the alcohol trade, the electronics trade, the pharmaceutical trade, the food trade, the clothing trade, the tobacco trade, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, I know in Kenya, just like we in South Africa, the illicit trade has a direct bearing on the ability of our leaders to lift communities out of poverty and ill health and away from crime and unemployment towards prosperity. And we know it is a problem, especially on the African continent. This month, we've seen your Minister of Finance in Kenya desperately trying to balance the nation's finances at one of the most difficult times in their history. To that end, the minister relies on tax revenue, and he has caused some distress by imposing new taxes that push up the price of basic goods for the ordinary person in the street. And I think that is something that we cannot ignore, the fact that taxes continue going up. One of the reasons that the minister had to do that, from what I'm told, is because of tax crime, including the illicit trade, which is crippling his and the government's ability in Kenya to raise the money needed to sustain the country. We have a similar problem in South Africa. Make no mistake, the illicit trade is not a victimless crime. And I'm going to repeat that. The illicit trade is not a victimless crime. The illicit trade directly affects the poorest of the poor, who are dependent on basic state services, including the social security, safety net for old age pensioners. It affects the child grants, the tertiary education. It affects the need for students to get money for their education, and the list goes on and on and on. And I did not tell you now at the time in COVID, more and more when governments need money, the illicit trade continues to thrive. And most telling of all of this, during this time of this pandemic, it affects the funding of healthcare services. We know there's a shortage of vaccines in South Africa. Government says they don't have enough money. We know that you have a similar problem. Government says it doesn't have enough money, simply because these damn criminals are becoming richer by the minute, and it is up to you and I and all of us to fight the illicit trade at every turn. And that is why I salute you and all the participants for standing up against the illicit trade. Kenya's anti-counterfeit authority tells us that the illicit trade cost the nation about 153 billion shillings annually in lost tax revenue. Yes, 153 billion of shillings in lost revenue. That's about 419 million shillings every day. It's a massive amount of money. In South Africa, we lose approximately between 8 and 15 billion, if not more, in taxes every year because of the illicit trade. And it's even going up by the day. It's mind-boggling, Program Director, if you look at these amounts of money that can be put into good use, but yet it is going into the pockets of these criminals. And that is our major concern, that the criminals are getting rich at the expense of you and I, especially the poor people. So it's therefore essential that everyone in society understands how damaging the illicit trade can be, and it's vital that everyone understands the vast scale and the huge sums of money that is filling the pockets of these criminals every day. This is why our survey that has produced these shocking results need to be highlighted. Every single consumer question has witnessed illicit goods sold in Kenya. Every one that was questioned mentioned the illicit goods available in Kenya. But five consumers, less than 3% of those questioned underestimated just how much tax is being lost. The true sum is 4 times what most people believe or initially thought of. And that's why this report, which is aptly called Robbed Blind, which I'll share with you, when I'm going to ask the Program Director to share with you after the presentation, and please have a closer look at some of the numbers. All over the country, Kenyans are being robbed by the illicit trade, but everyone is apparently blind to it being true, and it's a devastating cost to the economy of Kenya. As we look at the report in detail, I would like to, first of all, again, thank the Consumers Federation of Kenya, who conducted the survey, very briefly and very quickly. By posing multiple questions over the phone, the researchers canvassed the opinions of 200 adults, consumers, namely 106 men, 94 women from 9 countries. Every group was well represented. And as a result of the question, one which was highlighted, all respondents in all countries said that they have come across illicit goods on sale in their countries. This survey shows that this endemic is very, very widespread nationwide across Kenya as well. Respondents were definite in their answer, with not a single person saying that they were unsure or haven't witnessed illicit goods on sale. And let's confront the brutal facts. Wherever you go, you'll find that the illicit goods are being sold, sometimes openly, sometimes very quietly, but most of the times openly. Question 2 found that consumers are most concerned about the dangers exposed by the counterfeit or the smuggled food, indicating an awareness of the health risks associated with the illicit trade. Question 3 is where we learn how little awareness there is about the huge financial cost of the illicit trade. Only 3% of the respondents realize that Kenya loses more than 400 million shillings in tax revenue daily, every day, because of the illicit trade. An overwhelming majority, about 68%, believe that the losses are just 1/4 of the actual figure. This is an indication, friends, that the full impact of the illicit trade is not properly appreciated or understood. Somebody asked the question, do you think the law enforcement agencies are doing enough to fight the illicit trade? Most certainly not. I think that's part of our survey. Corruption is a problem. Uselessness is a problem. Laziness, inefficiency is a problem. Question 5 reveals that there's a massive dissatisfaction with the government's approach to the illicit trade, with 84% saying that the state is not doing enough, 84%. Question 7 showed that most people know that the significant role that we as citizens have to play. We must introduce anti-corruption initiatives and increase public awareness of the problem. And according to question 8 of the survey, but the consensus is that multifaceted approach is needed to combat this dark economy. So what does the survey leave us with? We believe that government must sit up and take note as a matter of urgency. The illicit trade is everywhere, but we cannot sit back and allow the disastrous impact of it to be swept under the carpet. The Kenyan people want their government to up their game against the criminals in the illicit trade who are stealing their futures and putting their lives in danger. We are not fighting with government. We want to partner with government. We want to hold hands, and we want to fight this illicit trade as a united front. That is why I set up, together with my colleagues, Test Justice South Africa in 2019, and our message was loud and clear, and we continue to reinforce that message every day. The South African public are now better informed about the menace of the illicit trade, and recently I met with officials of the South African Revenue Service, the South African Police Service, and other law enforcement agencies to explain our concerns, and they have full understanding, and they agree that we all need to join hands. StoCK, which is StoCK, the organization that Stephen heads up, has the same aims and will be encouraging your government to reinvigorate the war on the illicit trade by reducing corruption, by strengthening the country's borders and enforcing the trade laws. Let me say in conclusion, Chair, and why myself and my fellow director from Tax Justice, Makali, are here today, is that I want to emphasize that the illicit trade is an international problem that needs international solutions. And I also speak as the Vice President of the international body, Crime Stoppers International, that sadly is not very active in parts of Africa, largely only in South Africa. We need to take this message to every part of our continent. Just as Tax Justice is aligning with Stop Crime Kenya to fight the problem, Kenya must enhance cooperation with its international neighbors to combat the illicit trade and build a better future for all of us. And I hope that when our lockdown is eased, myself and my directors can visit you in lovely Kenya to support you, to appeal to your government to take all the actions. But I think the time has now come for all of us to join hands, for civil society, for governments, for members of the public, and fight the illicit trade. We cannot sit back and watch these criminals looting our country, looting our fiscus, making millions and involved in all forms of crime. Thank you, Chairperson.
Very well said, Yusuf. I think I don't want to repeat anything. Our colleague just sent me a small note saying that your passion can only be equivalent to that of probably somebody I should not mention, but one of your countrymen called Julius Malema. So somebody was saying that passion is very good. Thank you very much for that. But very importantly, you said something that illicit trade is not without a victim. I mean, the victims there are many victims, and I think that's the important point that you did mention. Then the global approach that you propose, I think, is very important. For my Kenyan colleagues, and I can see we're probably about 58 or so. For my Kenyan colleagues, I can only tell you that Tax Justice South Africa is a very strong entity. They began the same way you started StoCK, the Stop crime in Kenya, and our appeal is that as many of us, come together to say no to the challenge of illicit crime. And it's about partnerships that we need to follow through, ladies and gentlemen. So as we move on, this was a very, very important presentation from Yusuf. And Yusuf has been a brainchild of this discussion. I really don't want to have enough time to talk about the kind of support that he has offered, direction and what have you, together with one of his colleagues. So having said so, we have a next poll that we're asking for the next 10 minutes, whether you think enforcement agencies in Kenya are doing enough to fight the illicit trade. And we'd like you to juxtapose that with the findings of the survey that Yusuf has just been able to release. I think that was a very, very fulfilling presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now go to still with the government. Our second last presenter is Ahmed Antar Amin. Ahmed Antar Amin is the head of the Quality Inspection Department within the very important arm of government called Kenya Bureau of Standards. Ahmed, I think, has been in a very high-profile meeting somewhere, just been able to pull him out. If he's ready and he can hear me, the floor is his. He's already sharing the screen, I guess. Ahmed, are you ready? If you are, please, you have about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, all.
Thank you.
This is Ahmed Amin from Kenya Bureau of Standards. I'm sorry, I'm on the road.
I can see in a very nice ride. So no problem. I know where you're coming from, so people will understand.
Just from another meeting. So I'm heading to the office. So I'll just give a brief presentation. I want to give a brief presentation. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, you are. Ahmed, is your floor. We are hearing you, and we, of course, enjoying a live presentation as you cruise the roads. Please enjoy the ride and ask the driver to be a bit soft on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutoro and the team. It's my pleasure to be in this call. I would like to give a brief background on the issue of how KEBS, what KEBS does, and then I will give the issues to do with how we tackle illicit trade as a government institution. So the Kenya Bureau of Standards, in terms of establishment, is an old institution, not very old, but it was is the national standards body in Kenya, established through an act of parliament, the Standards Act, 496 laws of Kenya, currently responsible under the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. We have a vision, mission, motto. Our vision is to be a global leader in standards-based solution that delivers quality and confidence. And our mission is to provide standards-based solutions that promote innovation, trade, and quality life. Our motto is standards for quality life. You apply standards to enjoy quality life. Our core values are 5: integrity, customer focus, excellence, and sustainability. The main mandates of KEBS, KEBS is mandated as through the Standards Act, and also the legal notices. For inspection, we have legal notice 78 and this attendant amendments. Currently, we have amendment through legal notice 212 and legal notice 53. Our work is to promote standardization in commerce and trade, products, provide product and system certification services, undertake educational work and standardization work, and handles the issue of dissemination and maintenance of SI units of measurement. Currently, KEBS services are anchored into 3 main areas. Standardization services, which is in terms of development of standards, starting from company standards, national standards, regional standards, international standards, as well as maintenance of measurements in terms of metrology, the NMI, technical support to multilateral and bilateral agreements, and then conformity assessment through inspection, applying international standards like ISO 17020, quality assurance through product certification, ISO 17025, Amin 65, system certification and testing services. We undertake training services and also provide a dissemination of standards through the national inquiry point. To combat illicit trade, which is the main issue that we need to tackle today, KEBS work is mostly to protect consumers through the establishment of a directorate called Directorate of Market Surveillance that deals with enforcement and ensures compliance to standards and regulations. The directorate works closely with other government agencies and also the consumer organizations in fight against illicit trade through intelligence sharing. The other aspect I would like to say here is that illicit trade is a global issue, and as Kenya Bureau of Standards, one of the strategies that we have applied is the three-layer approach in terms of product inspection and quality control and safety control issues. How do we do that? Products, before they are exported to Kenya from other countries, this what we call pre-export verification of conformity to standards at the country of supply. For instance, if we are importing from South Africa, China, UK, we have contracted inspection agencies that have been verified that have the competence to carry out product inspection at the country of supply on behalf of Kenya Bureau of Standards, and they issue what we call certificate of conformity. Upon these products coming to the ports of entry in Kenya, there's what you call applied risk-based random inspection at the ports of entry. Depending on the product risk profile in terms of, is it a highly illicit trade, pirated product? Is it a product that is highly counterfeited? Based on that, could it be a substandard product? Based on this product risk and also the sensitivity of the product itself in terms of consumption, then it's what we call the random-based risk-based inspection at the ports of entry. The other aspect is the market surveillance at the points of sale by our staff at the Directorate of Market Surveillance. The other strategy KEBS has applied is through consumer engagement through a platform we call Wajibika na KEBS campaign that creates awareness of quality checks on our products through the verification. So in this platform, we are normally very active on Twitter, Facebook, and all other social platforms. The other aspect that we also apply is the use of standards. Remember, through standards, each product standard requires that a product needs to be packaged and labeled in a certain manner. By use of the enforcement arm of KEBS, then we normally check the conformance to the requirement of the standard packaging and labeling requirement. The other aspect is the product certification that we normally do and stakeholder engagement. So these are some of the strategies we apply. And on imports, we have also what we call the import products comply to the requirement of standards. Some of the challenges, if I may mention, is that sometimes consumers also look for cheap things and something that might not be regulated. And those are some of the things that also entice people to pirate, and so that to avoid what we call the compliance to the regulations. The other aspect is the brand owners. The brand owners are also shy of publicity of their products to be said that it has been counterfeited. So those are some of the aspects that needs to be really, we need to come together to create a lot of sensitization in terms of product conformance, the negatives of illicit trade, and why we need to come together to fight this fight at the global level. So as my previous predecessors in this forum aptly stated, illicit trade is a global menace, it's a global problem, it requires global solution. And therefore we need to come together to find a lasting solution through what we call sensitization and engagement both in public and private sector, so that the public and the private sector is not seen to be competing, but seen to be complementing each other in the fight against this illicit trade. Thank you so much. And mine is just to say, to welcome, and might be if there's any question. Otherwise, thank you so much. And for those who are outside Kenya, karibuni sana. We have very nice sceneries and very nice areas where you can visit and enjoy your holidays. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. That's the Kenyan spirit of Hakuna Matata, promoting our tourism. That's for Makali, that is for Yusuf, that's for Steve. Welcome to Kenya. That was Ahmed, Antar, and Amin, and he's the head of quality inspection at the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Very good presentation again, under very difficult circumstances, but I think he really has been able to deliver, again in the Kenyan spirit. That's very well done. Now the poll that we had about whether people, and this is for Mr. Amin and the company government, it's not me who voted, but people who feel that you're doing an excellent job on illicit trade as enforcement agencies are actually 2%. The ones who feel that you're doing a good job are 11%. Ones who think you're doing a fair job are 51%. 35% feel is not very good at poor, but I think after 51 plus 11 plus 2 is over 65% feel you're doing a good job. So keep it up, you and your colleagues in government. Having said so, we are also on Twitter trending at number 6. I'm told we are trending on Twitter at number 6 under Stop Crime KE, Stop Crime Kenya. So if you're also on Twitter, you can be able to log in and continue the discussion at Stop Crime KE, Stop Crime Kenya. Now we'll come to the last presenter, I guess. And normally we reserve possibly the last for the best, but obviously for the other gender, Madam Makali Lepholisa is a consultant. Is she ready? Makali, if she's online, I guess she is. She'll be joining us, I'm sure, shortly. But I'm told we are searching for her because she was at the moment. If she can be able to raise her hand, Makali, if you can raise your hand so they can locate your name among many others, that I'm sure would be very useful. Please. Yeah, we have been able to locate you among the huge crowd of people following. So Makali Lepholisa is a former customs, head of customs or commissioner for customs for a country called Lesotho. Today, she is a director of the Tax Justice Africa. She's also a very committed consultant on the subject matter. She's also been already invited to Kenya by colleagues. I don't want to say she's Karibu Kenya, but she obviously welcome to Kenya, where after COVID subsides. Having said so, Makali says she has a huge presentation which I saw and will share, but she assured me that she can do that within 5 minutes. Welcome, if you can hear me, Makali.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I believe it's afternoon for everybody. As I've been introduced, I am Makali Lepholisa. I'm based in Lesotho. I am a director for Tax Justice South Africa. Yeah, I have very wide experience in taxes. I was in customs. My last job there with the authority was as a commissioner of customs and excise in Lesotho. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and it's been very interesting to listen to the presentations that have been done. And actually it just touches on most of what I will also going to be saying, though as much I will try to bring it to context into the Southern African perspective. I think the definition has been put up. I think I just wanted to also talk into how it's defined, but of importance, I just want to look into the issue of the sale and purchase, because sometimes people think when they are buying, they're not contributing into the illicit market. But we are actually trying to now say, if you are part of the problem, you are creating it and you're exacerbating it. So as much as you might be saying, I just bought something that was already there, but if you don't buy, then it means it can't grow. So to me, the definition, when it talks about now the buying part, it's very significant. And within the region, I think it's the same, like listening to what my other colleagues and other presenters have said. It's very predominant to say people go for this illicit because of the products that are similar and then the price disparities. If they want this handbag, which is a Louis Vuitton, it's selling for 100 rands. And if you go to the original product, it will be selling for 20,000. People will say, okay, they look the same, and they go and buy it. And in that way, it makes this the market to be more lucrative to those who are both participating, whether buying or even producing. Then the tax spread, we know that it's also very good to tax these products, but when you look into products like alcohol and tobacco, the taxation of these products is normally very high, which is in a way trying to control from the health perspective. But in a negative way, it also now drives the gap in the pricing, making that gap to encourage the illicit. So that is also one of the drivers. When the gap, the taxation now is too high, or now it doesn't match the economy in that particular industry, it drives the illicit. And the porous entry points. Our borders within the region here, they are very, very porous. I'm also talking about us here in Lesotho. Lesotho is one country that is completely surrounded by South Africa. We have a few formal border posts, which are commercial, but the rest is just land border, border posts that are not properly secured. They don't even have officers manning them. And the smuggling. When people smuggle, and then they get to reroute because of the bribery and corruption that is at our ports. If they know that, or the officer that I work with is in this particular border, they don't mind driving kilometers to meet with that particular officer who is facilitating for their entry or exit of those illicit products. And then that free income, the illicit, these criminals, they know that if they sell more, there's no tax. It means they don't report any of the income that is sold from these illicit products. So that is actually something that makes them do more and more, because you know that the criminals, they just want more of what they're getting, and they will just continue as long as no one does anything. And as that other point where I'm saying the consequences, if they do this and no one does anything because of the same issue of corruption, they know that they have paid all their way to the highest people in power. Nothing will happen to them. And while we've talked about these products, I think some of my colleagues have also highlighted, and what we see in the market from the pharmaceutical, narcotics, tobacco and tobacco products, the counterfeited manufactured goods and clothing and shoes, sunglasses and everything, minerals. There's so much in this space, especially in our region. I've seen that alcohol and spirits, petroleum products, and it's sadly the human trafficking is also one of those key. And now when we put human beings as being products that are trafficked, it's one of the sad parts. You know, I extracted these figures. It's an old report, but I was just interested to highlight these figures. This was a study that was done in 2012, but I was just looking at the numbers at this day and age. And then if I just thought Yusuf would also project current figures that we could see and then do a comparison of these. These are old, it's an old study that was done looking into the region. In South Africa, there was an estimate of 6.3 billion sticks This was, like I'm saying, 2012. And at this day and age, these numbers are not going anywhere down. Namibia, they also have the same problem, where the study actually revealed 12 to 15% in consumption of the illicit products. This was basically looking into cigarettes. The study looked at cigarettes, tobacco. It also looked into alcohol, but I just did an extract of the tobacco numbers. Zambia is not spared of the illicit. Swaziland, Mozambique. Mozambique, the numbers were a bit minimal, but I know that countries like Swaziland are very much impacted by most products coming through from Mozambique. Zimbabwe, the numbers were very insignificant that they were reported, but it's also interesting because the numbers of cigarettes that are coming through into the parts of the region come from Zimbabwe. So these are some of the figures that I extracted in just one old report that I was reading. So in the region, this it's very rife. Illicit trade is quite big. And just highlighting on issues now with regards to the economic impact, the revenues that these people get. It's fund terrorism, trafficking of human beings, and a lot of other crimes, guns, and all the bad things. It's easy for them because the money is not recorded anywhere. It is not reported anywhere. And the undervaluation, this basically now says they value these products to a minimal, and it's basically now says nothing will come into the government coffers because those figures are not produced in the right way. They misclassify the products from drawback, refunds. These basically some of the customs issues that we find because as a result of goods not properly declared. The health threats, we can not say that much because we know that as much as they continue to produce these products in a way that is not regulated, they will not meet the proper standards. Even if it's manufactured goods, they will not have the same quality of the real original product. Alcohol that is produced in the back streets, it is very dangerous. So there are very, very big health threats that we can get from these issues of illicit and the encouraging of corrupt practices. People want to get rich. They can do anything. They just get the money and they can do anything and forget about the implications of bringing in these illicit products. And the tax paid by businesses, we don't get that money because now the illicit is overtaking the market that the legitimate businesses are supposed to be collecting from. And the tax revenues cannot also be overemphasized that we lose because of these kind of businesses. The first presenter talked about those fragmented or uncoordinated enforcement approaches. These are some of the things that we see within the region. And the most interesting thing is the StoCK, which is a lot of countries that form part of StoCK. There is SACU, which is also a customs union. But even though we have this coordinated structures, there is still very uncoordinated approaches. And if we're able to work together, not in the siloed manner, I think we could get more out of this. We could be able to even control and enforce better. Some of our other region, SACU, we share the revenues on the excisable products. Whatever we collect is put together in one pool. But still, we are not able to come up with common measures that can actually try to bring more revenue that we can share. I made mention of even the controls. Some are using tax stamps, some are already making information to get especially for products. It would be best if as a region, we're able to come up with a common solution and share information and share resources as well as the capabilities such that we're able to coordinate efforts and bring these criminals to book. Oh my God. Hello? I don't know what happened to my presentation. Okay. And okay, I just want to also quickly go through recommendations that I have put up just for us to look into. also based on what I said, to basically, there is a need to introduce like good habits. By good habits, it's something that will encourage compliance, because as human beings, people, they do things that other people do. So if people litter, for example, the others will see that, oh, it's not a bad thing, they will litter. So we need to have methods or strategies that can just encourage good human beings, good compliance by citizens in general. If people know that if they don't stop in a traffic light, nothing is done, it becomes a habit and they do those bad things. And that is why people will sell illicit products and people will buy. But if there are methods that can actually come up and enhance this good behavior in human beings, I think it can be a starting point to get us to the right place. The rule of law, we need to arrest people that are doing the wrong things, and we need to make examples. But if people continue to do the wrong things and nothing happens, we won't win the battle. And the training officials, they're trying, they're making a good effort, but some of them, they become part of the problem. Because if you know that we have officers, you have police, you have the army, but at the end of the day, they become part of the problem because they are accepting bribes, then that is where we have a problem. But we need to increase training and more support and tools that they can use. Legislative reforms, we need laws that will actually support also the enforcement with penalties that are equivalent to the kind of crime that is being committed. And the evaluation methods to assist customs officers. We need political support that will actually enforce zero tolerance to corruption. Because if at the highest hierarchy, people are still not as clean as you'd expect them to be, then what would you expect of the citizens? Control systems, like I've mentioned, I've talked about the track and trace issues, but we need to have systems that where we're able to trace a product from the beginning in the whole value chain to see how it goes to the end. And then the lifestyle audits to see those people that are just becoming rich from nowhere. There is a need to audit the lifestyles, follow the money, find out what is happening to the product and get them to do what is right. The collaboration, I'm glad now we're talking to Kenya, and as tax justice, I think for us it's very important that we actually do this advocacy work. We talk about these things and we tell everybody what needs to be done, collaborate, share information, and make sure that things that are done correct. And then the revenue administration, the customs authorities, they need to really talk to each other so that they're able to share information and are able to enforce better, use common approaches and risk management, and in that way, they will be able to add value in what they're already doing at the moment. Thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation.
Very well done, Makali, in terms of time and in terms of content. I think that was an excellent presentation. Again, in the interest of time, I wouldn't want to get into it, but you've given recommendations that I think are very good for us to follow through. I think at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we have just a couple of minutes to conclude our session. Please, if you have a question, we'll get in the question and answer mode. Just raise your hand and we'll be able to pick you. Please, let's have anybody in the intervention. The 5 speakers, if none, of course, with yeah, you can raise up your hand. We can see Niziemana, Shin, you. Please raise your question or comment. Please, yeah. Sorry, unmute your mic. Shin, unmute your mic. Maybe we can jump in if not ready. We go to David Mwaka. David, if you can unmute. When you want to ask a question, you raise your hand and unmute, because if you don't unmute, you can't speak. So we are trying to see how we can help those who want to raise questions. We can try Dennis Masaki. Dennis Masaki, kindly unmute.
Hello.
Yes, please say your name quickly and your intervention.
Yes, I'm Dennis Masaki. Are you getting me? Hello?
Yes, can you proceed? We can hear you.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
That I want to pose to the panel, because I've listened to the presentation by all the members who have presented, right from Dr. Oruta, Dr. Akoten, and I've noted that all the problems, most of the problems are being the fingers are being pointed at the enforcement officers and the inspectors. I wanted to pose a question to them. Is it that the enforcement officers are lacking legitimacy in carrying out their duties? I understand they draw their mandate from the Constitution, but the work that they are supposed to do is not. They are not doing their work as expected. What could be the problem?
Maybe we could take one more question before we go to the panelists. One more question. Please give your name. We have Henry Jagi. Henry Jagi.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
My question to the panelists is, there always seems to be a public perception that preference is given to those who are either in big business or politically connected, so that they can engage in illicit trade and counterfeit goods and suffer no consequences. But the blame is always pushed to the small-scale traders, whether they are engaging in illicit trade or not. They are meant to be the victims on whom the blame and punishment falls. Is there a way that the enforcement agencies can cultivate the trust that the counterfeit goods are not brought in by the big businesses, but they are unable to act on them due to the political reasons? And secondly, my second question is the area of public education, so that the common person can easily identify the counterfeit goods. Because sometimes you find, for example, the handbag that we are told about, the illicit handbag and the illicit handbag look almost the same. How can we educate the general populace to be able to tell the difference and therefore not buy the counterfeit one? Thank you.
Good questions. Maybe one very last one. A question we could, Muturi, you would like to ask a question? Kelvin? Kelvin? No, if you cannot unmute, maybe. When you ask, even go ahead, please, you unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Muturi, we can hear you very briefly.
Yes. My name is Muturi, Kelvin.
Yes.
And I've listened and I've even gone through the reading and presentation, and I've seen the part the public plays in dealing with counterfeit. But now, you see, if you don't have faith with the system that you are reporting to in regard to counterfeit, do you think the public will be motivated to report all these incidents? Because, for instance, there is a time in my going routes, I found some people somewhere in Nakuru preparing tomato sauces illegally, unga, hii unga ngano hii. And you realize the containers got the KEBS stickers, and you wonder, where do those people get these things? So me, I'm expected as a person who, as a public, who sees and recognizes that this is a counterfeit or those illegal products being circulated in the market, I will report. But my wonder is, the first thing before I go to report to the enforcement, where did these stickers come from?
Thank you very much, Mr. Muturi. I hope that you're not attempting to answer, but it's a very good question. Now, can we go to the panelists to have a response? The panelists from Dr. Oruta to government, anybody who can be able to please respond.
It's Yusuf Abramjee. Can I just give a very brief response, Chair?
Yes, Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't answer the questions in details. I just wanted to make one or two general points. I think it's very important for members of the public, not only in Kenya, but across the world, to make it our moral and our civic duty to blow the whistle on criminals. Someone, somewhere, somehow knows who's involved in crime. Someone knows who's selling illicit goods. Someone knows who is buying illicit goods. And that is why we need to partner with law enforcement and make sure that we blow the whistle on the people involved in the illicit trade. So we as civil society, we as members of the public, have a role to play to blow the whistle on them. Secondly, corruption is a problem. Yes, it's not a problem only in Kenya, it's a problem all across the world. Apologies. And in South Africa, it seems to be growing. We have good law enforcement officials, we've got very honest law enforcement officials, and we've got corrupt law enforcement officials. Just last week, 5 soldiers were arrested on the Limpopo border into Zimbabwe. They were facilitating the stolen cars being taken out of South Africa up north. We've seen even before police officials and soldiers, members of the South African National Defence Force, being involved in the illicit trade, transporting and selling illicit cigarettes and other products. So, as much as we point fingers at the corrupt law enforcement officials, we have to strengthen our partnerships, in our view, with law enforcement. Work with the good cops, but I think a lot of policemen and women also need training. We need to make sure that we equip them, especially our revenue service, to not only identify these goods, but to bring the culprits to book. It's good to arrest the runners, but we have to get to the kingpins. So whether people are manufacturing illegal medicines or illegal cigarettes or illegal food products, we have to get to the kingpins. These kingpins are making millions and millions of shillings and rands every week. They're involved in money laundering. They're involved in other related crimes. We have to get to them. And my appeal to law enforcement and to you is to put pressure on law enforcement to get the big fish, the so-called big fish behind bars. Thank you.
Very well said, Yusuf. And I think the question is, we can actually become better police than the actual national police. Whether we equip them, we give them everything, but through community policing and other avenues, the call is on us, as you rightly put it, that we need to blow whistles against criminals. I think the same question goes with what Joshua Ngcebo just asked, that there has been an increased rate of kidnappings and missing persons in Kenya currently. What should the people do to ensure that they are safe, since the security personnel are kind of reluctant to respond to these cases? I think that goes in line with the same response that Yusuf has given. Can we have other panelists, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Ahmed again.
Yes, from Kenya Bureau of Standards.
Yes, what I would like to say is that thank you for this call, and thank you all participants. It's a very important engagement. What I would like to say is that, first of all, as government regulatory agencies, we are all aware that the government cannot be in every person's shop, but the public are everywhere. What we need to have is elaborate networking, and also working together as a team is the most preferred approach. So what I can say is that in terms of reporting, The government offices, as far as KEBS is concerned, is very open. You can report anonymous. We have also very clear lines through emails, through even toll-free lines, which is very easy to understand what is called the KEBS 1545. 1545 is a line that you can call and report anything, and you can confirm that you can report anonymous. The other thing is you can call us, also write to us through email, through our engage us through the Twitter handle, as well as the Facebook page. The other thing that I want to say is that on the issue of substandard goods or products that somebody coming up with tomato paste somewhere and having KEBS stickers and all that, let me just demystify one misconception. The Kenya Bureau of Standards does not sell stickers. It doesn't issue stickers. What it does is that once product is certified, it gives the manufacturer permission to use the mark. And that mark has a track and trace system where you can demonstrate. And therefore that is the permission that the manufacturer has been given. But you will never see KEBS giving a sticker or a stamp, as well calling it, but you are given a permission to use a certain mark. And that is what you call the certification marks. Those distinctive certification marks have a trace and track system that is traceable to a specific database, where you can verify through the app, which is downloadable from the web store. And also, you can also verify through short text messages. So that is the platform that we have currently for to ensure that and to authenticate the marks that you see on in the market. The other thing that I want to also demystify is that cottage industry is not shunned away. The cottage industry in the global market is the big employer, is the enabler of the business in economies in the world. So what we need to have is that where we see a small person coming up with a small technology, we normally have a mechanism where we carry out what's called incubation in terms of standardization. We incubate that process by giving technical support, by moving on together until the product meets standards. And that is the time now they are given the permission to use the mark and allowed the product is sorry.
Yes.
The product name, then the product is allowed to access the market. So that is what I can say in terms of the cottage industry. The other aspect is that we need the consumers and other business community to work closely with us by also reporting, as well as in the global market, what we call quality is market driven. If you don't get the right quality, value for money, you shun that product. But here in these third world countries is the other way. And that's why now the aspect of regulating quality is in this part of the world, which should not be the case. What we need to regulate is health and safety related issues. Quality must be regulated by the market. And therefore that is what we need to inculcate in the common man, that if this product does not meet your requirement, then we need to report and then we take correct actions against the manufacturers. So that is what I can say in terms of this issue of substandard products and also the issue of marks. Otherwise, thank you, and I appreciate the callers.
Very well, Ahmed and Amin. I know there are quite a lot of issues that people want to deal with. I know Dr.
I also wanted
to Akoten. I just wanted to say Dr. Oruta is in Western, and I'm told it's raining very heavily. The network is very poor. Are you able to get us just for a parting shot, Dr. Oruta, or is still that bad? I think the rains can't allow him. So we can have Dr. Akoten with the response and a parting shot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen Mutoro, for giving me this opportunity. I want to address the question that was put forward by Kevin Muturi, that we all know that the problem on illicit trade is not about the traders, but the law enforcement. How do we deal with the law enforcement, because they are the biggest impediment in the fight against illicit trade? Now, my answer is that all of us are to blame. Our statistics basically show that there's a lot of illicit goods in the country, and those goods have been brought by the business people, because they're not here just by chance. So somebody may have actually either developed them within or even imported them. So somebody brought them into the country. And then secondly, of course, so long as there's demand for these illicit goods, suppliers would go out of the country, go and bring them into the country. And that's why as ACA, together also with other multi-agency, we have come up with a two-pronged approach. One is to increase the public awareness on issues of illicit trade so that the demand for these illicit goods can go down. But we find that from our research, around 70% of consumers have purchased counterfeit goods less in the last few months. So it means that they're the ones actually who are creating the demand for these illicit goods. And that's why now the traders, together also with other suppliers, that have taken advantage of that, gone to these other countries and brought this and imported these illicit goods into our country. So there's demand for these goods. And that's why the traders are also playing a role in terms of facilitating illicit goods in the country. And then secondly, if you look at also the distributors, the traders, the business people, they are also playing some game with the law enforcement agencies. They read our act, they read our laws, they understand the various penalties that can be imposed on them, and you find that they are trying to evade, arrest. They are evading, hiding some of these goods in their own houses, sort of. And if you look at even, the cases that we had recently, people are keeping most of these goods actually in their own homes, and then they would sell it to whoever requires them. So you find that the traders are also facilitating illicit trade. And then on the law enforcement side, yes, we have very good law enforcement officers who are doing their good job in terms of serving the country, whether we're talking about here in Kenya or elsewhere. But of course, we still have a few elements who would want to, corrupt and ensure that some of these goods actually can come into the country. So those are the people actually, as a multi-agency, we've been able to deal with. If you find anybody who is not doing the job the right way, of course, the law takes its effect. And then another big challenge that we have, of course, is the issues about trade. Any efforts that you want to introduce, either to increase the inspections of goods at the port of entry and so on, can actually be regarded as an anti-tariff barrier. So countries are supposed to facilitate trade to ensure that whenever goods come into the country, they can allow these goods to go in and move freely. And they have to use intelligence to ensure that they're able now to, based on intelligence, they can seize containers and conduct inspections. But of course, there's capacity issues where we are not able to do 100%, inspections. So we have to rely on intelligence, and sometimes intelligence may not be forthcoming. Again, we rely on the same traders maybe to give us intelligence and so on. So there's a bit of challenge here and there. And then again, if you look at our country, Kenya, in terms of the porous borders, we are, as law enforcement, of course, we are not able to cover every part of the country. And therefore it becomes very difficult really to police. And some of the traders, of course, they use the panya routes to bring in these, unmanned and gazetted entry points, to bring in these illicit goods. That becomes really a big challenge. So the problem really is all of us. So if the consumers can do their part in terms of, reduce the demand for these goods, then there will be no supply for these goods. And therefore the law enforcement will also have, they have also to do their part in combating illicit trade. Thank you.
Very well said, Dr. Akoten. If consumers can reduce demand, is equivalent also to the same way consumers would expect to get awareness so they can be able to reduce that demand. Thank you for the good job you're doing. Now we have 30 seconds each for Makali, if you're hearing me. Makali, a parting shot from Lesotho.
Yeah.
Can,
Okay.
yeah, please, just a parting shot, and thank you for the good work.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation and to be part of this discussion. I think this is a very serious problem that we all need to fight. And, you know, I think the question with regards, the same one that Dr. Akoten is just responding to, this is, with the enforcement agencies, they need the support of everybody, because by the time they get to the ports, we need to have done a lot of work internally. The intelligence, the investigations internally, to check who is doing what and how they're doing it. Is it the right thing that they're doing? The licenses that are being issued on the production that is being done, all those things should be done internally before this could start even moving. That is why it is important to trace from the source up until the end to the consumers, because if you can be able to identify the whole chain, it can make it easy to see what is right and what is wrong. But at the end of the day, it is our responsibility, all of us. And we cannot blame the enforcement officers if anything goes wrong, but it is all of us to make sure that all citizens do the right thing, because it is for our own benefit, for our own health, and for our economies to grow. Thank you.
Very well, thanks. And that is a very good note to end our discussion. My brother Yusuf had left earlier because he was rushing to another meeting. We have more questions, but the time doesn't allow us, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to begin by thanking the panelists, Ahmed, Antar, Amin, from the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Thank you very much. Dr. Akoten John from the Anti-Counterfeits Authority. We've had Dr. Evans Oruta from the Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. Thank you very much. And of course, Makali and Lepholisa from Lesotho. Thank you for those very good presentations. We are now going to probably share the notes and the questions that have not been answered to the rest of the panel. But I as always say that good things normally take a shorter while. They should last as soon as possible. You don't want to take long. I want to thank participants who have been coming in, some leaving, some who have been there all through. Thank you for your time. I also want to thank my team here, particularly Eliud Ochola of Ola Media PLC, who has been able to make sure that the technical work of this work goes on very well. Colleagues who I can't even mention on this presentation, thank you very much, and may each of you have a wonderful evening, and soon we'll have another presentation to follow up what we have been able to do. Thank you, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.